So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up. We will hold bad landlords to account because the Donald Trumps of our city have grown far too comfortable taking advantage of their tenants. We will put an end to the culture of corruption that has allowed billionaires like Trump to evade taxation and exploit tax breaks. We will stand alongside unions and expand labor protections because we know, just as Donald Trump does, that when working people have ironclad rights, the bosses who seek to extort them become very small indeed. New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant.
Yes, that's what it sounded like last night in New York City when Zohran Mamdani won a historic election for mayor of that city. I am Pete Dominick, and I'm very happy to have you joining me here on Stand Up, my daily podcast, and thank you very much for your support. We are an ad-free show. We've built an amazing community of people, and I'm very happy to have you as a part of it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being you. What a night. Across America, there was a massive rejection of what has happened to our country in terms of the last couple of elections. That's for damn sure. Last night, writing at his Substack, The Left Hook, our friend Wajid Ali says, "My friends, this is what we call a blue tsunami, and the majority's righteous middle finger to MAGA and Donald Trump's failed policies and politics of cruelty. Oh, what a beautiful day." He wrote, Zohran Mamdani was announced as winner of New York's mayoral race. Meanwhile, in my current state, Virginia Democrats achieved a trifecta with nearly every county going blue. Instead of being a nail-biter, the New Jersey gubernatorial race was a total double-digit blowout victory for Democrat Mikey Sherrill. Later, we learned that 65% of Californians voted for Prop 50, which is the state's aggressive response to Trump's shameless redistricting campaign to steal the House. Detroit also welcomed its first female mayor. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejected MAGA. Democrats gained 2 seats in Georgia's utility board, which is all bad news for the GOP heading into the 2026 midterms. And even J.D. Vance's half-brother lost bigly in Ohio. He goes on to say, this was an epic beatdown and shellacking that is forcing a moment of reckoning for a few Republicans, but mostly an epic, much-deserved meltdown by MAGA reeks who are absolutely losing their shit on Twitter, everywhere else. Whining, complaining, conspiracy theories, and the hyperbolic laments of America's demise encapsulate the current mood of right-wing hacks who now live firmly in Donald Trump's anus and are unable to dislodge themselves from a historically unpopular president. The rest of us tonight should be embraced with joy. I have no delusions of grandeur, and I'm a pragmatist. I don't idolize politicians. To me, they are simply tools that meant to serve the greater good. Our job is to sharpen them and push them to help the majority. If they become dull and useless, then we replace them. However, tonight is different. Zohran Mamdani is the first Muslim American mayor of New York City, one of the greatest cities on earth. He's young, a democratic socialist, an immigrant, a person of color, and a man who has emerged as the enemy of the establishment. The brawligarchy and hate mongers threw everything at Mamdani, including Bill Clinton, and he still emerged victorious. A young upstart who was a distant number 2 just a few months ago, defeated Cuomo by nearly double digits, inspired a record turnout. He showed that you can dream big and run a progressive campaign of affordability that brings everybody on board and doesn't need to sacrifice, quote, the woke, especially immigrants, LGBTQ plus Muslims, Jews, and young people. The question remains, will the Democratic leadership take the right lessons from this tsunami and double down on progressive politics that address the people's needs, or continue to suck at the teat of the brawligarchy and corporate donors? That was Wajid Ali at his Substack, and I thought a really great way to start the the show and mention some of the results at the same time. Well, I am coming to you from just north of New York City, and while the election results nationwide were positive for democracy and Democrats and Democratic Socialists even, not the case in my town. Nope, Clarkstown, New York went full red in terms of our town board and town supervisor, but the Democrats are rebuilding here in my town, and I have been honored to be a part of that for the past couple of years, kind of punching in and out and working with them and almost becoming one myself, a candidate that is at one point for like 2 hours. And so we're gearing up for next year's election. That's a lot of what we were doing this year. So excited to hopefully try to gain some seats next year, but just a point as to why local elections matter so much. Well, I've got full election coverage for you here at the Stand Up headquarters and a little bit of a news rundown, but it's time for the shit show. And then we'll get to my conversation with the great Eric Segall talking about a very important couple of cases today at the Supreme Court that'll be heard at the Supreme Court on tariffs and whether or not the president has all the power to do whatever the hell he wants with them. And Segall may surprise you today with his predictions and analysis. If you want to jump to it, it begins at about 38 minutes in. But let's get to those headlines and the clip show reactions from last night's elections, of course. We woke up to the news that Dick Cheney died. How about that? I made a video and shared it with some of the best initial reactions that I saw, and I put it out on social media yesterday morning because I couldn't not. Here's the stand-up theme, as always, under it. Well, breaking news, the former Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney, has died at the age of 84. Still no word on the cause of death, but some people are concerned that his rope snapped while he was bungee jumping. Yeah, well, I've gathered some of my favorite reactions from Blue Sky within 30 minutes of hearing that the former Vice President and real-life ghoul has died. And first, it's this guy. Dick Cheney was doing war crimes in exactly the right way by Ezra Klein. Thought that was kind of funny. How about this one? On the topic of Dick Cheney, one thing I've always said is that you shouldn't kill 1 million people. All right? Here's this guy. Damn, Mamdani killed Dick Cheney and he's not even mayor yet. It's funny. Dick Cheney has endorsed Andrew Cuomo. Oh, well. Let's see. The collective global obituary on Dick Cheney will be, we thought he was the worst it got. We were wrong. Oh, that's clever. Remember the time that Dick Cheney shot a guy in the face and then the guy had to go on TV and apologize for how being shot in the face made Dick Cheney look bad? Yeah, that was one of my all-time favorites. Dick Cheney won't see your mean jokes about his death, but Tony Blair will. Hopefully. Tony Blair, of course, was the Prime Minister of the UK who joined with the architects of the Iraq War, Bush and Cheney and company, and invaded Iraq. Dick Cheney arriving in hell and seeing Kissinger. I knew you'd be here. And finally, when I texted my mom this morning that Dick Cheney had died, this is what she texted me back. Well, guess he won't be shooting anyone again. There you go. Bye-bye, Dick Cheney. All right, that's the video, the audio from the video that I shared yesterday. You can find it on all the social media platforms. And if you liked it, I'm going to try to do kind of more of those fun recaps for breaking news, even when it's sad or tragic. I think it's important to see a wide range of perspectives and sometimes, yeah, jokes. Because sometimes jokes are what gets us through, and that is why I'm here to bring any humor I can to all of this serious, impactful stuff that we're dealing with, the shit show. So let's continue. The government shutdown is now the longest of all time. That's right. Shattered a record set during Trump's first term. So there you go. We did it. The pain is going to continue for a whole bunch of people. Those who can take it the least, often who work the hardest. The injustice of it sucks. The 35-day government shutdown ties the longest in American history. And on Thursday, it will be the longest in American history. Maybe there'll be an impasse that could happen at the end of this week, but it remains to be seen. The Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, said yesterday that the U.S. might be forced to close parts of its airspace if staffing shortages amid the government shutdown continue. So that's pretty bad. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that the Trump administration regime will pay out SNAP benefits as ordered by court, even though the president posted hours before that the funds will be given only when radical left Democrats open up the government, which they can easily do, and not before. Well, they are going to pay them out late and not what they owe, but still, it is apparently some of it's going to be dispensed soon, but not before the rest of us have to make up the gap, donate to our local food pantries, and more. The Treasury Department said Monday that inflation remained above the target of 2% in the third quarter. So even the Trump administration thinks that Trump himself is lying about inflation. A federal appeals court said yesterday that there had been undue delay by Judge Aileen Cannon in reaching a decision about whether or not to release the second volume of report by Jack Smith, the former special counsel, on our dictator Don's alleged mishandling of classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. Remember? You know, boxes and boxes just everywhere of classified documents, a case that was dropped after he returned to office. The ruling from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit in response to a lawsuit by the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University, it gives Judge Aileen Cannon 60 days to fully resolve pending motions that could trigger the release of the report, which would be a pretty big deal. Jack Smith really wants to testify, and as Trump and his goons come after him, Jack Smith is more than ready. I read a lot of reporting on that. He can't wait to talk about what he's learned and share the public what he knows as they come after him. Also should mention that our president, Napoleon Bonaparte, apparently is developing a range of options for military action in Venezuela. Wait, I thought we weren't starting new wars. One would involve airstrikes against military facilities. Another envisions sending U.S. forces to seize control of Venezuela's oil fields. That sounds like boots on the ground to me, doesn't it? To you? General Fatton has yet to make a decision on how or whether to proceed. Officials said he was reluctant to approve operations that might place American troops at risk. Oh, that's good. Some of his top advisors are pressing for one of the most aggressive options, sending special forces to capture or kill Venezuela's leader, Nicolás Maduro. Could you imagine? That would be really, really bad, I think. In other foreign policy news, the country of Nigeria's government leadership denied that there was an existential threat to Christians in the country, as Trump has claimed. Trump is running around trying to protect Christians, apparently in other nations as well. I don't know about what that – I know he posted something on social media. I don't know what the story is in Nigeria, but the fact that they had to make that announcement probably tells you something. In climate news, the annual UN report card on greenhouse gases found modest progress offset by changes in U.S. policies. Oh, man, like if we had stayed the course, it would have been that much better, but I'll take the progress. That's really surprising. Apparently, MSNBC is investing $20 million to change its brand to MS Now. Good luck. $20 million brand change. I'm sure it'll be fine. Those are all of the stories that I've got for you here in the headlines portion of the shit show. Now, let's get to the audio. Plenty of reaction from last night's results across the country. First, I want to share with you my segment that I did with my friend David Campbell, my bestie, my husband down in Australia, is the anchor of the Today Show down there. Today Extra, actually, is the name of it. And his co-anchor, Belinda. This was last night. They brought me on to talk about some of the election day stories as well as Dick Cheney's death, and I thought it went good. It was fun, funny, and passionate at the same time. I thought we did a good job, and so I wanted to share that segment with you first.
Well, the race to lead America's biggest city is right now underway. New York voters are heading to the polls this morning to elect a new mayor. This is the first since Donald Trump's second term began.
For more, we're joined by US political commentator and comedian Pete Dominick, live from New York. Hey, Pete, always great to have you on. I mean, the favourite to win is left-wing Zohran Mamdani. What's the feeling like there in the Big Apple?
I haven't seen anything like it in my lifetime. I mean, I live just outside New York City, but I was a New York City resident for 12 years. It's where I met David Campbell back in like 1970 or something, a little later than that. I worked there for many years later, and to see such an exciting candidate bring people together from all backgrounds, socioeconomics, religions. New York is the most diverse city in the world, and he's been able to bring people together in a way no one ever has.
I would agree, and I think his social media game has been really strong on this as well, Pete, and it's gone worldwide, his campaign. Now, that being said and done, President Trump on the weekend on 60 Minutes in America has called Mamdani a communist. So what's he going to say if it looks like Mamdani is going to become mayor?
It's shocking that MAGA Teresa Gasolini is calling names. I mean, can you believe that he's calling people names? If you think Zohran Mamdani is a communist, it only betrays a kind of ignorance about politics, economics, and government. It's a preposterous thing to say. And the reason why Mamdani is so popular, because he's a populist. His ideas are really popular amongst people who are not political. I mean, these are ideas that you guys in Australia and the rest of Europe would see as absolutely normal, but in America, to some people, they're considered somehow extreme, but they're not. It's like...
So what's he running on? Tell us what, for people at home who haven't been following the race. What is he saying?
He's running on a consistent message, Campbell, which is something a lot of politicians don't do. He's running on affordability. He's running on the idea of making living more affordable. It is so expensive to live in New York. I mean, as you know, I live in a army boot of a wealthy landowner myself. It is expensive here, and he's running on affordability. One of the most expensive things, we had to leave the city when my first daughter was born because we couldn't afford to send her to preschool. So universal health care, universal pre-K is what it's called in America, just before the first grade kindergarten. He's talking about making public transportation free, which would actually make the city way more money because people would be able to get to their jobs. It's really popular. The idea that they would freeze rent, all these ideas are extremely popular in New York.
Yeah, talking sense. If Mamdani wins, could we see Trump ramp up ICE raids in New York?
I mean, I think it would be a huge mistake. I think it would be a huge, it would backfire. We've seen it backfire in cities across the country, including a big city like Chicago. If he does that, Belinda, it's an important question. It would only unify New Yorkers more against him. And I don't think you want New York City and New Yorkers against you, no matter who you are.
Yeah, right. We want to move on now because former Vice President Dick Cheney has died, and he has left behind one can only be argued as a complex legacy. Pete, what are your thoughts?
I'd like you to unpack complex because I don't think it's very complex at all. I suppose you could be suggesting that only because at the end of his life he came out against Donald Trump. I mean, you could suggest that a lot of people thought he was the worst America had ever seen until Donald Trump, but he still is arguably, in terms of anyone who's more responsible for the invasion of Iraq, would be him. He's the architect for the war. He lied America into war. I think that his legacy is not complex, but one that most Americans see as a generational monster to a lot of Americans and to a lot of people around the world. There's all kinds of different international agreements and numbers that almost 1 million people died in Iraq. I would argue, because I've worked with veterans and veterans organizations for over a decade in my life, that he also destroyed a generation of warfighters, of veterans in America, in their lives, making it so much harder for so many people with PTSD, suicide, veterans health care, it's unemployment, drug addiction. A generation of veterans lied into war, not to speak of the Iraqis, the innocent Iraqis who died. And so that is what people think of him. And also, he shot his friend in the face, and his friend apologized. That's power.
I forgot about that.
Is that what you mean by complex?
It was a hunting accident, is what they said. It was a hunting accident. Yeah.
Right. Well, interestingly, Dick Cheney wasn't Trump's biggest fan, which seems to be an increasing sentiment at the moment, with the president's approval rating falling to a second-term low of 37%, Pete.
Yeah, Belinda, it's a really interesting question and point. Like, why didn't Dick Cheney like Donald Trump? Why we see so against Donald Trump? For one reason, because Trump attacked his family, particularly his daughter Liz Cheney. But more importantly, I mean, that you lose me on that when you're Dick Cheney, because arguably Dick Cheney paved the ground that Trump just paved the White House with, because Dick Cheney was always about giving the president, the executive branch, all the power, and he was able to do that very effectively. So he opened the door for a tyrant like our Orange Julius Caesar.
You're in a government shutdown still. It's about to become the longest government shutdown of all time. And at the same time this is happening, President Trump's just renovated a bathroom to be entirely marble and has destroyed half of the White House so he can build a ballroom there. Yeah. How does that look to the American people who are now looking like they're not getting some income so they can feed their families?
Sometimes when I come on with you guys, I love that you ask questions that you absolutely know the answer to, and all of your viewers do too. Our government is shut down. People are losing money for food, for healthcare, soon for heating, and the dude's building a marble bathroom and throwing a great Gatsby party. Let them eat cake and whatever else. It looks terrible, Campbell, Belinda. It's bad. 35 days our government has been shut down. There's a lot of suffering. There's only going to be more. And that's tying the longest shutdown record that he passed the first time we somehow elected this guy. And so it's really bad. There's a lot of pain, and it looks like there's going to be a lot more.
Maybe he's working on a new reality show, like a renovation show.
That was what they suggested on Saturday Night Live this weekend. Pete, it is always great to have your insight, and just from all of us here in Australia, happy birthday for last week.
Yeah, happy birthday,
He's hit 50.
50?
Yeah.
You said 30 there.
Well, it's a mistake because he looks 78.
30?
Okay.
30, Belinda. If I was 30, you would look at me and go, what happened? Oh, he had a hard life.
Well, you do live in America.
We love you, buddy. Good to see you.
Thanks, guys. Keep dancing.
Thanks, Pete.
Oh, man, that was fun. Fun as always. It was interesting what she said when she said, well, you do live in America. I believe that there is this stereotype assumption, which I think is fairly accurate, that life is harder in America than in Australia and a whole bunch of other Western European countries and countries around the planet. I mean, because life is less stressful, a little easier, less scary. I mean, it's not easy anywhere in the world, but I was thinking about that comment as I heard Belinda say it. Well, you do live in America, so you age quick over there. Anyway, I hope you appreciated that. I enjoyed doing it and wanted to share that one with you. You can watch it. I'll post the clip when they send it to me on all my social media platforms. I hope that you are following. All right. Now I open the show with a little bit of Zohran Mamdani's victory speech last night in New York. I want to play you another clip from that same speech, that same moment.
The sun may have set over our city this evening, but as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity. For as long as we can remember, the working people of New York have been told by the wealthy and the well-connected that power does not belong in their hands. Fingers bruised from lifting boxes on the warehouse floor, palms calloused from delivery bike handlebars, knuckles scarred with kitchen burns. These are not hands that have been allowed to hold power. And yet over the last 12 months, you have dared to reach for something greater. Tonight, against all odds, we have grasped it. The future is in our hands. My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty. I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name as we turn the page on a politics that abandons the many and answers only to the few. New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change. A mandate for a new kind of politics. A mandate for a city we can afford. And a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that. On January 1st, I will be sworn in as the mayor of New York City. And that is because of you. So before I say anything else, I must say this. Thank you. Thank you to the next generation of New Yorkers who refuse to accept that the promise of a better future was a relic of the past.
All right, there you go. The whole speech is really worth your time. Zohran Mamdani in New York last night. Also in New York last night, one of the other leaders, most influential people in the Democratic Party, also from New York, it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
He had to match not just defeat a Republican. He had to defeat a Republican and the old guard of the Democratic Party at the same time. He was fighting a war on two fronts and not just one. And he still won resoundingly. And I think the message that sends is that the Democratic Party cannot last much longer by denying the future, by trying to undercut our young, by trying to undercut a next generation of diverse and upcoming Democrats that have the parties, the actual party, that are actual electorate and voter support.
All right, let's go to California, where the governor, Gavin Newsom, talked about the huge win they had, and the only thing on the ballot was Prop 50 to redistrict in reaction to what Texas started, this undemocratic redistricting move to help rig midterm elections and the next presidential elections. Here is the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, last night.
To be part of this narrative this evening. We're proud of the work that the people of the state of California did tonight to send a powerful message to an historic president. Donald Trump is an historic president. He is the most historically unpopular president in modern history. In every critical category, Donald Trump is underwater. He promised to make us healthier. He promised to make us wealthier. We're sicker and poorer. And he fundamentally understands that. Why else would he call Greg Abbott saying he's entitled to 5 seats? Why else is he trying to rig the midterm elections before one single vote is even cast? He understands his position at this moment in the United States of America. One thing he never counted on, though, was the state of California.
There you go, Gavin Newsom last night in California. Let's head now to New Jersey and listen to the new governor there. It's Mikey Sherrill, who is a former congresswoman. She and her roommate, they shared a apartment, I think, in D.C. Congressman Abigail Spanberger also won in Virginia. Thought that was pretty great, pretty interesting. Here is Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill.
So thank you to everyone who's joined me in fighting for a better future. I know these are tough times. I know not everyone voted for me, but I'm working for everyone. Every single one of you. When we all do better, we all do better. So tomorrow begins a new day. And at each new day in New Jersey, the sun rises over the Statue of Liberty, a daily reminder of her promise. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. She declares that her lamp lights the path to the golden door. That golden door is New Jersey. It always has been. And that expectation is well deserved, especially after this election, where we chose, we're going to follow Lady Liberty's beacon. We're not going to give in to our darker impulses. Here in New Jersey, we know that this nation has not ever been, nor will it ever be, ruled by kings. We take oaths to a constitution, not a king. We've chosen liberty, the very foundation of democracy, and we've chosen prosperity necessary to create opportunity for all. So New Jersey, to quote the boss, the future is now. Roll up your sleeves, let your passion flow. The country we carry in our hearts is waiting.
Yeah, there you go. Mikey Sherrill, the governor-elect there in New Jersey, where apparently they moved every county in New Jersey to the left or to closer to Democrats. Was it her? Was it her campaign? Was it the situation in the country, prices? Was it the fact that we have an aspiring king? Who knows? But that is big news in New Jersey. Let's go to Virginia and listen to Abigail Spanberger, former Congresswoman, CIA agent, the first woman who will serve as governor of Virginia following a streak of 74 men. Her campaign was laser focused on attacking Trump's policies. And guess what? She won huge in Virginia as well.
My fellow Virginians, tonight we sent a message. We sent a message to every corner of the Commonwealth. A message to our neighbors and our fellow Americans across the country. We sent a message to the whole world that in 2025, Virginia chose pragmatism over partisanship. We chose our Commonwealth over chaos. You all chose leadership that will focus relentlessly on what matters most. Lowering costs, keeping our communities safe, and strengthening our economy for every Virginian. Leadership that will focus on problem solving, not stoking division. We chose leadership that will always put Virginia first. And Virginia, I cannot wait to get to
All right, there you go. Abigail Spanberger in Virginia last night. And there's a lot more reaction and victory speeches, but I want to move on to just a couple more clips for you before we get to my conversation with Professor Eric Segall. First, here is Graham Plattner, who's running to be the senator in Maine. He's a bit of a mess for several reasons, which you may or may not have been following, but he's also a veteran, and he had this to say about Dick Cheney's death yesterday, and, well, guess what? I'm here for it.
Everyone, Graham Plattner here. Usually when a former vice president passes, we all take some time to mourn. As a veteran of the Iraq War, I'm going to say, no, not this time. Over the next couple of days, I'm sure there are going to be thousands of think pieces written about his legacy. But the only legacy that we have to remember is that he wasted thousands of young American lives, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives, and trillions of dollars for absolutely nothing. If we take anything away from this, it should be that we need to build a politics that keeps the politicians like Susan Collins, who support illegal foreign wars like the one in Iraq, accountable.
There you go. He turned Dick Cheney's death into a campaign ad for himself against Susan Collins, who voted to authorize the Iraq war. So there you go. I think that's absolutely worth it and exactly what he should be doing, because accountability is arguably why we find ourselves a lot in this situation in America, is my opinion. All right, here is Matthew Ho, also a veteran who I used to be very good friends with. Been a long time since we talked, but I really liked seeing this from him yesterday.
I should be happy today that Dick Cheney is dead, but there has not been any accountability for his crimes and his lies. No justice for my friends who were killed in Iraq, or more so for the millions of lives that were ruined, maybe as many as 1 million dead in Iraq. No justice for them. So I find myself today, Judge, sitting here hoping that maybe in his last moments, Dick Cheney was cold, alone, and scared as he died. And that's my hope. And that's his legacy to me, is that that's what I wish upon another human being, to leave this world in that state.
Matthew Ho. A cold reaction to the death of the former vice president on Judge Napolitano's show. I don't know. But regardless, I wanted to play you some reaction. I gave you my reaction, obviously. and my reaction is heavily influenced by my connections to, experiences with, relationships with the veterans who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. But if I was going to give you any other reaction, it was going to be from others who fought, served, and lost friends in Iraq. So there you go, Graham Plattner and Matthew Ho. And finally, I got some jokes for you. It's Seth Meyers last night on the Late Night with Seth Meyers program.
Today was election day. We tape early, so we don't know who won, but we do know who lost.
Curtis Sliwa.
And we all lost a little bit not having him around. New York City elected a new mayor today. Eric Adams will go back to his first job, insisting he's on the list. CNN has published a profile on New York City Democratic mayoral nominee Zohran Mamdani's wife. So bad news, lady. He's married. And even worse news, Cuomo isn't. After President Trump posted on Truth Social over the weekend that the Defense Department must prepare for possible action in Nigeria, Secretary Pete Hegseth replied to Trump's post and said, quote, "Yes, sir." Gross. You guys are like those couples who wish each other happy anniversary on Facebook. It's like, don't you live together? Why are you dragging us into it? The artificial intelligence company Anthropic reported recently that its most advanced AI systems are starting to become introspective, so they're already more advanced than AI executives. Sotheby's has announced that it will auction off a sculpture of a solid gold toilet titled America, though I don't know if that's fair, since the toilet actually works. And finally, a Mississippi mom fatally shot a monkey last week that escaped from an overturned truck, whose driver mistakenly told authorities that the primates were infected with COVID-19 and various sexually transmitted diseases. She's being charged with trying way too hard to get into a monologue joke.
Yeah, very funny. Seth Meyers, last night at Late Night, and that is all I've got for you here in the opening segment. That's the shit show, and you can rely on it pretty much every day. I'm here most weekdays giving you the rundown, the recap, and bringing on one of the smartest people I know to talk about the most important issues facing us here in America and around the world, in your life, in your town, whatever it is. And today, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments about more executive power, whether or not the President of the United States has the right and authority to just tariff whoever the fuck he wants to and do whatever he wants all the time. And so Segall brought this to my attention, said there's a lot to know. We talked about it. I learned so much from him, as I always do. The headline at NPR, Supreme Court enters the lion's den on Trump's tariffs. Supreme Court hears arguments Wednesday in a consequential case with potentially profound economic consequences for the country and the presidency. The issue is tariffs. The case before the court contends that the president has exceeded his authority in imposing the tariffs unilaterally. In some 24 previous cases, the Supreme Court has been largely receptive to his claims of presidential authority, but those victories came on the Supreme Court's emergency docket, allowing his policies to take effect on a temporary basis while litigation played out in the lower courts. But this tariff case is the real deal, with the court having ordered a full briefing, expedited arguments in the case, and offering justices the first real opportunity to say potentially no to the president. That's what I talked with Eric Segall about and more. We talked about Dick Cheney. We talked about gambling and sports. And at the end, he crowbarred in his concern or interest and curiosity in what could be alien life, like orbiting the sun. I didn't know about this, but Segall worked it in. Great conversation, as always. Georgia State constitutional law professor. He's written books. He hosts a podcast. He is one of the most coveted commentators on the court, and he's gained a lot of respect in the time that we have known him. I love him. He's a good, close, personal friend of mine. And here is my conversation, which was live yesterday on YouTube and Substack. You can watch it, youtube.com/StandUpWithPete. Go subscribe there and at Substack. Let's do it right now with the Legal Eagle, Professor Doom and Gloom, Eric Segall. I want to just start by asking you about the breaking news here on a Tuesday, Election Day, that Dick Cheney died. And I know you have thoughts. I have thoughts. I've been watching people share their thoughts all morning. I feel like one of the most accurate reactions that I've seen, which is a pretty common one,
is people saying, I never thought it could get worse than Dick Cheney, but it got so much worse, much worse, in fact, that Dick Cheney himself cut an ad before the election saying that Trump was the most dangerous person that America's ever seen. And it was pretty stark coming from him because of who he is. So that's my quick take. What is yours?
I have two. First of all, Henry Kissinger was worse than Dick Cheney. So Henry Kissinger destroyed a country for generations for no good military reason. That's the first thing. Not that Dick Cheney wasn't awful. The second thing is this. There was a moment in time, Pete, and I know your audience is going to find this hard to believe, when Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor, who's now a laughingstock, was actually a serious person who did seriously good work for criminal defendants and was a real person. And he once said something really profound, I thought. And it was the day Justice William Rehnquist died. On the day a day after Justice William Rehnquist died, he wrote an op-ed for the New York Times or the Washington Post. I forget which. And at that time, Dershowitz, who was a reasonable human being, said the following. My mama taught me two things. Always tell the truth and never speak ill of the dead. And Dershowitz said, these two values, which I hold dear, are in conflict today. I agree. Always tell the truth. I do that. And try not to speak ill of the dead, such that when Scalia died, and I got a number of phone calls and requests, I said, I'm not saying anything bad about him today because his family is in the world. And in Dick Cheney's case, his family is in the world. And one of his family members, I think, has done America a pretty good solid for the last few years. So here's my answer. I don't miss him.
So you stay principled on the don't speak ill of the dead?
Not on the day he dies.
So tomorrow?
Well, I waited 2 weeks for Scalia.
What?
So
I still can't get you to say anything about Charlie Kirk. You're terrified.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not terrified. But again, his family is still mourning. So we.
His wife didn't look like.
Hold on. Henry Kissinger, William Rehnquist, and Antonin Scalia did unconscionable harm to this country in government positions. Charlie Kirk did not have a government position. It's a different situation.
I was only saying, I would certainly not comparing them, although he was the most influential person in the conservative movement, arguably. So you can connect the dots. But I wasn't comparing him to Kissinger or Cheney, who I would say Cheney was the worst of his generation when it comes specifically, obviously, to war crimes, to a war, to a generation of veterans being destroyed. It wasn't nearly as terrible as Vietnam was, obviously, but it was a generation.
To be clear, I wasn't referring to Vietnam, which wasn't Kissinger. Well, I was referring to Cambodia, which Kissinger carpet bombed, led to tyranny, starvation for generations, under the pretense that was a national security thing for getting our troops home safely, but it wasn't. It was revenge. Right. It was, the history is pretty clear.
When I said Vietnam, I meant Cambodia as well, but I also meant the Vietnam War. Okay, so that's Cheney. That's done. Let me ask you just...
It is done, Pete.
Oh, listen to him. Sounds awful.
I'm in a mood.
He's in a mood. You're here to talk about a Supreme Court case that will be argued tomorrow that deals with whether or not the president has the ability or responsibility to do everything around terrorists. I also want to ask you about his violation of the War Powers Act and the fact that I guess every president has. But just real quick, hot takes with Segall. Yeah. It's election day. And I wonder if there's any elections that you're paying attention to or any thoughts on America here on election day and how the strength of our democracy is.
Well, the strength of our democracy is very, very weak. And getting weaker as we talk. During the 1 hour or however long we spend together, it'll get weaker during that hour. There are a couple of local elections in Georgia that my friends are telling me I have to vote in. I don't, other than governors and senators and mayors, I don't usually get involved in local elections because my time is so busy doing federal stuff. But I don't. Talk to me in 1 year. 1 year from today or next election day, that's going to be the big one. And that election day, I don't know why leaf blowers just started, but I hope
no one can hear it.
Okay, good. I fucking hate leaf blowers.
Really? That seems like a pretty first world problem.
Yes, but we can go to the moon, so we should have leaf blowers.
That's a fair point. It's a fair.
At least I think we went to the moon. I'm more interested in what's happening in preparation to next year's election, because that's not just about who gets in office, but that's about the future of American elections. So
whether or not the midterm elections will be, quote, free and fair, how much of a thumb will be on the scale in any district or any state as a result of, by the way, that state's responsibility to regard, regulate, secure their own elections. And we have seen all kinds of fealty to a king from MAGA Republicans, and so it's not hard to imagine that some state or another will.
Hey, let's not forget that the United States Constitution, that document that used to govern our country, actually, in terms of elections for the House and the Senate, states do have the first and primary responsibility for choosing the time, place, and manner of elections. However, Congress can override that. And for example, the reason we have single-member districts is because Congress passed a law a long time ago requiring single-member districts as opposed to ranked choice voting and things I don't know anything about. But Congress could override all the stuff states do about elections for the House and the Senate. So we have to blame Congress, too, to some extent. It's not the president. Congress has the ultimate authority to regulate elections in this country. We shouldn't forget that.
Statewide elections?
No, but elections for the House and Senate.
So when states rig their own districts to effectuate an outcome, Congress can't really do much about that other than encourage.
That's a complicated question. Let's leave that for a different day.
How dare
but as
you?
to the House and the Senate, the Constitution is completely clear. Congress, the states can regulate time, place, and manner, but Congress can override that. Let's be clear about that.
Okay, so today's election day, but tomorrow there will be an argument made at the Supreme Court, actually two, I guess, regarding whether or not the president of the United States can control how tariffs work, and more specifically, how he can use the law or the Constitution, I guess is what they're looking at.
So let's be clear at the outset. I've been thinking a lot about how to present this to you because it's complicated.
Yeah.
But your audience knows me. Most of your audience knows me and knows my views about judges and all that. This is not a constitutional law case. And the reason I'm saying that is because, as you know, as your audience knows, I'm not in favor of the court being interventionist in constitutional law cases. So I'm usually a person advocating judicial restraint, even in cases like abortion, where I'm radically pro-choice, but famously against Roe versus Wade. This is not that kind of case. This is a case interpreting federal statutory law. So it doesn't trigger my usual reluctance to have judges have to get involved one way or the other in this because we're interpreting a federal statute. We're not interpreting the federal Constitution. That's very important.
We're not interpreting the federal Constitution. That's very important. Got it. Nonetheless,
Yep.
Supreme Court's going to hear oral arguments in two consolidated cases that present the question whether our dear leader can impose upon tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And
let's just call it IEPA. IEPA.
It's fun to say.
Yeah.
And this matters for a lot of reasons. I read what you sent me to read, and I got a little bored by the analysis of the interpretation of it. So how can you make me – I feel like the most important thing here is if he can do this, yet another power that you're giving the executive, what can't he do, as Michael Dorf makes in one of the things he sent me in terms of the Federal Reserve. It's just it would seem to me that if this decision goes in favor of the administration, it gives more power to the king and it becomes more of a kingdom, and that is the real issue here.
How about we back up?
Okay.
And let me try to make the issues accessible. I may fail, but let me try to make the issues accessible and then talk big picture, because there's two different things. The legal issues are one thing, the implications are another. So there's a law, and it's a good law, Pete. We should have this law that says where there is an emergency, a real emergency, the exact words are an extraordinary and unusual threat to the United States, then the president can declare a national emergency and exercise all kinds of powers that he normally would not be able to exercise. One of the uses of this law that people might remember is when our hostages were taken by Iran, immediately back in 1980 or 1979, President Carter did all kinds of things. Iran had billions of dollars of assets in America, and Carter used this law appropriately to freeze those assets, to make sure Iran couldn't get them back, et cetera, et cetera. That was all done under IEPA. The idea is Congress said where there's a true emergency, then we're going to give the president more power than he has in non-emergencies. And that's a good law on paper. Like, we want this law. It's a good law. The problem here is this law, if there is an emergency, which, as Mike Dorf argues in his blog yesterday and today, there is no emergency. What Donald Trump is calling an emergency is a trade deficit and trade imbalances that we've had for decades. By definition, if something's going on for decades, it's not extraordinary and it's not unusual and it's not an emergency. But even besides that, there's no mention of tariffs in this statute. The statute that Trump is relying on simply does not use the word tariff. It uses the word regulate imports. It's very important to this country's history to realize that regulating and taxing, tariffs or taxes, are different things. They're very different things. Congress has the power to regulate commerce. It also has the power to impose taxes. Those are different things. So not only is there no emergency under the statute, in my opinion, but also this law doesn't mention tariffs. Now, what the administration is saying is regulating imports gives the president the ability to say to China, Canada, Mexico, whoever, we're going to tax your goods coming into the country, 80%. The problem is, Pete, and this should be easy to understand, Congress has passed a bunch of other statutes that give the president the ability to impose tariffs. The tariff power is in Article 1, Section 8, which is Congress. Congress has the power to impose tariffs. Now, Congress can delegate that power to the president, and it has, in very narrow statutes that say the president can do these tariffs if this condition is met and for a very limited period of time and only to a certain percentage, 10%, 15%, whatever. So not only does this statute not cover tariffs, but dozens of other statutes do cover tariffs. And those are the laws the president should be using. So in all the legal questions, the president should lose. And I think that's and there are other reasons too. That's not why this case is so hugely important. What you were saying is, and I think you're right, is this is another example of President Trump using emergency powers like he's doing with federal troops, in American cities and nationalizing the National Guard and shooting Venezuelan boats and whatever. It's another example of him declaring an emergency where none of us really think an emergency.
Right.
And that is the problem right there. That's the problem.
It is a repetitive action to declare emergency so he can use or take powers that he shouldn't. And my question is, what is the precedent for this? It's so easy so often to look at him and go, I can't believe he's doing this. And we can talk about the War Powers Act, but then you'll remind me Obama did it or something similar. It's never exactly the same, obviously, when we're comparing one administration to a past and these different legal actions. But when did a president make up an emergency so he could take power? I'm sure it's happened, but what we're seeing on the streets, the things that he is saying and the things that they are doing, the purposeful propaganda and videos that they're making to make it seem like chaos in the streets, that's the easiest one to understand because the law enforcement, the heads of law enforcement in those states and the governors and attorneys general of those states are saying it's our responsibility to keep our people safe. And we're telling you, there's no emergency. We've got this through traditional law enforcement. It's one fucking block. You're making it seem like there's a riot. He's doing that here on tariffs. He's doing that in the streets. Do other presidents do it?
So the most famous example of this is an interesting one. And it takes me a few minutes. It's not a sound. I can't give you a sound bite. But during the Korean War, the Steel Workers of America declared there's going to be a national strike. And President Truman, who had complicated relationships with labor, was very worried that a national steel strike in 1951, 52 would really jeopardized American men and women in Korea. It wasn't called a war, Pete, but, it was a war. If anybody watches the show MASH, they know it was a war. There were bullets, there were guns, there were tanks, there were people dying. So Truman's lawyers go into court and they say, and by the way, President Truman was a Democrat and there were 9 Democrat justices. 9, all 9. It was a Supreme Court of 9 Democrats with a Democrat president. And Truman's lawyers went into court and said, we have a national emergency. Our boys and girls will die if this steel strike happens. And the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision, and then when he said, so I'm going to seize the steel mills, something Roosevelt had stolen, had seized private property during World War II 3 times. He said, I'm going to do what FDR did 10 years ago and seize private property, and let the federal government run these steel mills so that we still have steel for guns, for tanks, for weapons, for planes. And 9 Democrats, 6 of whom said to President Truman, sorry, you can't do that.
Wow.
Only Congress can authorize the taking of private property, even in an emergency, even in time of war.
Wow.
And and there were many different opinions, but the one that has stood the test of time, the one that Justice William Rehnquist cited in the case involving the Iran hostage crisis, is an opinion by Justice Robert Jackson. Robert Jackson, I have a blog post about this tomorrow on Dorf on Law.
Oh.
Justice Robert Jackson is one of those great justices who almost no one dislikes. In other words, we can talk about Scalia or Brennan or numerous other justices. The first one, John Marshall. And the great justices are normally controversial and divisive. Some people like them, some people hate them. The legal academy is almost unanimous that Justice Robert Jackson was a political moderate. He was the only justice, I think, in American history who was also the Attorney General of the United States and the Solicitor General of the United States. A very practical, well-liked moderate. And he wrote an opinion saying the president of his own political party can't do this because giving the president this kind of emergency power is really dangerous. It has no beginning. It has no end. And Truman called it an emergency. And the court stopped him from doing it. The court stopped him from doing it because they didn't believe it was a real emergency.
Well,
had they believed it was a real emergency, of course they would have let him do it. If they really believed American men and women were going to die, the court isn't going to stand in the way of the president. So this court, and by the way, Rehnquist clerked for Jackson and Roberts clerked for Rehnquist.
Right.
I would hope Justice Roberts looks at steel seizure, the spirit of that case, and says, we just can't let the president go around calling things emergencies that aren't emergencies. That, as you said at the beginning, that leads to much more power in the executive branch, if we want to talk about originalism, than the founding fathers ever would have wanted. It is true that during World War I, during World War II, during the Iran hostage crisis, after 9/11, these were emergencies. Like this was a time when you need a strong president and a strong executive. It just is, right? And now 9/11, I think over time, that became really problematic. But in the months after 9/11, we all thought it was an emergency, everybody. This is not an emergency.
Another thing that comes to mind is COVID, the pandemic, and the argument that people made around whether or not the government should take over manufacturing plants to make sure they manufacture anything from face masks to ventilators, or as Andrew Cuomo pronounces them, ventilator.
No, I mean, I think there were moments in time 3 years after 9/11 where people can, when Osama bin Laden was still alive, when we can have reasonable disagreements over whether something is an emergency. And if there are reasonable disagreements, then the court should side with the president. But in the steel seizure case, there was no reasonable disagreement. And today, there is no reasonable disagreement. There is no emergency. Period. So he shouldn't exercise. The IEPA only applies to emergencies. We don't have it.
Who decides when something is an emergency? It sounds like what you're saying in the past, the court did decide whether or not something was an emergency.
No. Most of the time, no, I'm not saying that. Most of the time, courts should defer to a president who declares an emergency. But it has to at least pass the straight face test. But then there's a bigger issue, Pete. And this is the issue that con law professors have been struggling with now since Trump got elected the second time. And I think I told you I wrote a blog post about how to teach con law in this environment, and it's very difficult. Do we treat President Trump as any normal president, or do we treat and teach that way, or do we treat President Trump as something different? So far, the Supreme Court of the United States, because of its loyalty to the Republican Party, has treated President Trump like any other president. And there's an argument for that, because whatever the court does today will matter 20 years from now. But my opinion is the Supreme Court should not be treating President Trump as any normal president. And my talking point for that is in the first 10 months of his second term, he has exercised more executive power in a grander way than any president since the Civil War. And our country is based on separation of powers, and our country is based on federalism. In other words, the way the founding fathers did a lot of terrible things, including slavery and a bunch of other stuff. But they had two great insights. One was dividing power at the national level is a good thing, so that power will be restrained. And dividing power between the federal government and the states is a good thing, so tyranny will be avoided. Trump is threatening both of those things by sending the National Guard or federalizing state National Guard units in just blue cities against the will of the state actors in those cities. He is threatening states' rights, something you would think the Republican Party would be against. Second, at the federal level, he's declaring everything an emergency, which basically, negates Congress's powers, something you would think the Republican Party would be against. This is a case tomorrow, where the court could send a signal to President Trump, we're not going to let you do this. So my question is, will they put Constitution and, frankly, originalism, which they claim to be, over party? And I don't know what they're going to do.
I guess probably nobody does. If they allow him to do this on tariffs, declare an emergency as a result there,
yes.
There's nowhere. I mean, where do they stop him on?
Well, they seem to be. The weird thing about that is before 2 years ago, these independent agencies, the FCC, the FTC, all those, Congress could limit the president's ability to fire the heads of those agencies. The Roberts Court has reversed all of that. And come June of this year, they're going to reverse everything and say the president has the unilateral power to fire independent agency officials for any reason he wants, except maybe the Federal Reserve, which makes no sense because there's no difference between the Federal Reserve Board and the FCC, the FTC, et cetera. Why are they doing this? Probably because they all have stocks. And they know that if the president can fire the Federal Reserve people for any reason, the stock market will in fact. So I don't know where these justices draw their lines. And let me be clear. I have gone on record now for the last 2 years as writing and saying in public, this is the most partisan court in American history. The one thing that these 6 justices all have in common is a completely slavish devotion to the Republican Party. Right. But I think the only thing more important to them than that is their own self-preservation. And giving Trump this power here and elsewhere not only threatens Congress and the people, but it threatens the court and the power of the court. And other people have written persuasively that other than being Republican Party devotees, the other thing the Roberts Court has done is made itself an imperial court, that they get to decide everything. That's why lower court judges are being stripped of their power. That's why the court is using the emergency docket to expedite cases from the lower courts to their own authorities without oral arguments, usually without long briefings, because a professor at Stanford called it the imperial court. If the court bows to Trump in this case, it is basically saying checks and balances are over. And that's a serious thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, let me ask you about another situation as well, because I read this line in I don't know which news, maybe the Times or something, but I think it sets the context. It appears that the Trump administration, did indeed ignore today's deadline for congressional approval of the ongoing strikes against Venezuela, required under the 1973 War Powers Act. It is taking the position that no approval is necessary since in its formulation, U.S. military personnel are not at risk in the strikes that have so far killed 65 people. And when I saw that this morning, I was like, well, of course, that's what they're doing. And in addition to the fact that they're literally seemingly starting a war in South America, which would be something we've been able to avoid for my whole lifetime, pretty much. Anyway.
Well, hold on, just 1 second there. One of the reasons we've been able to avoid wars there is because back in the 70s, we used the CIA to topple democratically elected leaders.
Well, we can certainly talk about the different conflicts and sides that both intelligence agencies and the military have taken in Central and South America throughout the 80s and before. Yeah. But in this case, they're shooting fishing boats or maybe drug boats. They've been trying to covertly, Trump even said it, overthrow the leader of Venezuela, something America has always done but not talked about openly. And yes, they are also potentially talking about threatening, saber-rattling, actual military boots on the ground, I think it's fair to say. So let's talk about the War Powers Act.
Yeah, and sorry, again, I don't have a soundbite answer for this. This law was passed after Vietnam, because, of course, we fought a war in Vietnam for over 12 or 13 years, lost 55,000 Americans, something like that, and never declared a war. The war was never declared. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the power to declare war. World War I was declared. World War II was declared. That was the last war that was actually declared. However, every president, Nixon vetoed the War Powers Resolution, the War Powers Act, but then Congress overrode his veto. And as far as I know, every president since has said it's unconstitutional. President Obama bombed Libya and did not comply with the War Powers Act when he did so. He used actual bombs. And the rationalization that was given was that the War Powers Act only applies to hostilities. That's the legal term, hostilities. And President Obama's administration said Americans were never at risk because we were dropping bombs from drones and, I guess, planes. And because Americans were not on the ground, there were no hostilities that put Americans at risk. What Donald Trump is doing is an extension of that because we were bombing Libya for military reasons. I don't think we are bombing these boats for military reasons. But this is one area where almost every president has abused their power. I was at the Justice Department when President Bush said, I am going to Kuwait. I am going to use military forces on the ground in Kuwait. I hope Congress gives me authorization. Now it's clearly going to be a war. I hope Congress authorizes this, but I'm doing it anyway. Now it turns out Congress authorized it, but he was going to do it anyway. I was there, I know.
And Obama in Libya.
And Obama in Libya. And by the way, not just Libya, it's not exactly the same thing, but Obama pressed a button, or his people pressed a button, and killed an American citizen having lunch in Yemen who was never declared by any court to be a criminal. Now, this American citizen was a criminal, was a terrible terrorist. This is not up for debate. His website showed it. But he was still an American citizen who had no due process. And President Obama assassinated him.
The issue around that was can a president assassinate an American citizen? And overwhelmingly, popular opinion was, yeah, if it's that guy, let's just be clear. I didn't support that, and a lot of people.
I didn't either.
A lot of people on the left didn't, and the principled people didn't. As bad of a guy was, because you do believe in due process and so on. But I think it's even. So my point there is saying we weren't too concerned about that because of who the guy was, and we're even less concerned about people on fishing boats who are not citizens and may or may not be running deadly drugs.
Pete, if they're drug cartels, he should arrest them. He shouldn't kill them.
Of course, he should arrest them, and they should do investigative work and due process and bring them to justice, which is what we have done. This country has done, around the drug cartels forever, and the war on drugs, which has obviously failed. But one can only imagine how much worse it would be if we just let them bring drugs in all the time on their own, I guess, without it being.
I'm not sure, but I don't know enough about that last sentence. People who do are skeptical of that claim.
Well, I've argued that all drugs should be legal and libertarians have for a long time. But I'm saying there is no perfect solution. We love our drugs. All I'm saying is if it were illegal and we let them drive across the border or float them in on a ship or fly them in and did nothing, then that would be bad. I think if we have laws, we should enforce them, generally speaking. Those kinds of laws.
Yeah. Although remember, federal law still prohibits most marijuana products, and we don't enforce that except against people of color sometimes.
Ray in the chat says it's bullshit. Alaki surrenders his American citizenship when he becomes a terrorist and an enemy of the U.S.
No, only with due process, or if he's on the battlefield. If an American citizen, we're fighting World War II, and some Americans fought for Germany.
American guy joined the Taliban.
Joining the Taliban is not renouncing American citizenship, unless he did so like under oath in the courtroom. The point is,
if he takes up arms and he's shooting Americans in Afghanistan,
but that person who was, by the way, a civilian was also killed in that, who was not a terrorist,
right?
In that attack.
Yeah, for sure. We're not talking about him now.
So what President Obama did in that situation was he said, "This is a very dangerous person who has been responsible for terrorist attacks in the past, in my opinion, who wants to do it again, and who is underground. So we have no choice but to kill him when we see him." Those were the rationales. That came 2 years after he did it. Not before, not simultaneous with, not a week after, but like a year, something between a year and 2 years afterwards. The problem with that, what your friend is saying in the chat there, is you give President Obama that power, and then future presidents take that power and abuse it, as President Trump would do, as we both know. So I think that issue is difficult. But in any event, it's one thing to assassinate an American citizen having lunch in Yemen, who in his own website we know is a terrorist, and killing people bringing drugs into this country with no due process, when we could just seize the boat. This is not this is not like Navy ships coming in. This isn't warships coming at us. These are small boats.
No, I mean, this is, by the way, literally what the Coast Guard does all day, every day.
Exactly.
People think they're making it seem like that the open seas are the Wild West, and you can just drive a boat in wherever you want. Obviously, there are gaps and holes, but there are planes and boats constantly, and submarines, by the way, quote, protecting the United States homeland all day, every day. And they can easily be tracked and arrested. And by the way, those boats that we're killing, by the way, are like off the coast of South America, headed to the Caribbean, not to the U.S.
So there's another difference.
The boats have like 3 outboard motors. Do you think they're fucking driving from South America to Miami? They're not. I mean, you don't have to know a lot about boats. And if they are, their entire haul is fuel, not fentanyl.
That's right. But there's another difference, too. And your friend in the chat has to concede this, I think. The guy in Yemen who was having lunch was probably responsible for killing American citizens in very direct ways. Not himself, but his groupies or whatever. These boats aren't killing anybody direct. I agree we should stop the drugs. You just said that. We both agree. Stop the drugs. We do. But you don't have to kill these people to do that. But we do. But you just don't.
Just to make your point more clear and the law more clear, we stop trucks, we stop planes, and we stop boats every day. All day, every day, we stop them. Most people aren't carrying anything, but we stop them. People get investigated at every border, at every point of entry, but they don't get fucking assassinated without being investigated. Like, you board the ship, you find the drugs, you say, where did these come from? You go to the route. That's how it's done.
When Obama assassinated that American citizen, and even when Obama bombed Libya, which I do think, by the way, was a violation of the War Powers Act, he wasn't doing it for symbolic reasons. No one in the world thought Obama was bombing Libya to make himself look strong as a political campaign. None of that. There were military reasons for doing so.
Well, it was to help support in Libya. It was to help support the resistance against Gaddafi and the Arab Spring.
Now, again, I think that was illegal what Obama did in Libya.
Sure,
leaving that aside, I think we have enough evidence to suggest that what President Donald Trump is trying to do here is send a message. And presidents are allowed to send messages, and they're allowed to make strong symbolic acts. But they shouldn't be killing people when they do that. Especially when, again, what Obama's memorandum said was we had to take this act as a matter of necessity. There was no other way to kill this terrorist because he was hiding. He was hiding all the time. He only came out, once in a while, and usually came out surrounded by people. So we had this one opportunity, and we had to do it. Those facts are very different than the facts today with these boats, which the Coast Guard could surround and arrest with very little. I've been watching a bunch of Netflix shows over the last few years, some of which involve Florida. And they all depict, I don't know if they're accurate or not, but they all depict Coast Guard vessels doing exactly what you're saying. They introduce, they see a drug boat coming, they surround the boat, they say, we're coming aboard. And by the way, these boats don't fight back. They have no weapons to fight back,
What do they yell?
Oh, never mind. I'm in a mood.
I love that you almost always reference, all kinds of different sources to back up your point. But the fact that you just took me aback and you're like, I've been watching a lot of Netflix lately. You never.
Going back to this case tomorrow, by the way, I want to mention an important fact, which is normally in these kinds of cases that involve major economic consequences, you have two sides, right? You have the liberals arguing X and the conservatives / libertarians arguing Y. Most of the interest groups that are interested in the economy are on the same side of this case. Don't give the president this power. Because tariffs are stupid, but that's not the court's business. The court's business is not, is this good or bad for the economy? But what these interest groups are saying is the reason why tariffs are given to Congress in Article 1 is important because tariffs are really serious things. And when we impose them outside of the emergency context, it should be done with reflection and by the people's representatives, not one person.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Cato and the Brennan Center. So the Brennan Center is the most liberal $1 billion funded organization under the rubric of NYU law. It's always on the liberal side of everything. Cato is incredibly libertarian / conservative.
Yeah, the Koch brothers funded it forever.
They're on the same side. Like everyone's on the same side of this.
It's true also of that you're talking about the issue of whether or not who has power to tariff. And it makes obvious sense that it should be in the power of the representatives of the people because it's my industry that you're hurting, specifically, let's say like agriculture or anything else, manufacturing or just, well, frankly, everything really. The other one that's similar to that, by the way, I always think about is immigration. There's no special interest and there's a lot of solidarity amongst the most profitable interests in America. They be pro-immigration, which is obvious. The only reason against immigration, overwhelmingly, I mean, we can talk about economics all day long, but it is in terms of special interests. It's not churches. It's not farms. It's not traditional conservative right-wing influencers. It's racism. Like it's xenophobia. And because it gets people fired up and it gets people to vote and it gets ratings and it gets followers and so on. But there's not like special interest again, because everybody's on the same page with tariffs and immigration, which is make as much fucking money as we can. Don't take money from us. Don't take people from us. Don't make our goods and services way more expensive unilaterally.
And because you mentioned immigration, I get to mention something I haven't mentioned in at least 10 of our last episodes, which is a record for me. I get to mention Judge Richard Posner.
Oh, no, you've mentioned Posner drinking.
No, I have not. Not in a while. It's been a while.
Drink.
The most famous judge not to sit on the Supreme Court, probably in American history. He's now very sick and can't talk. But when I talked to him in 2012, 13, 14, 15, the topic that made him the maddest, and he got mad at a lot of things, got mad at Scalia, got mad at Trump, got mad at a lot of things. But the topic that got him the angriest was immigration judges in the Seventh Circuit where he was a judge. Because he thought these immigration judges would just rubber stamp what INS said. This is during Obama's administration, and didn't in any way stand up for these immigrants who were here. He was appointed by Ronald Reagan. He was traditionally a conservative, and he said our immigration system back then was broken, but not in the way Trump is saying. He was saying the law doesn't reflect the reality, and he was the father of the law and economics movement. Going to your point, and what really bothered him about this was the underemphasis on how important immigrants are to the American economic system. And
to every economic system of every country at this point.
I don't know about that, but I know.
Well, I do. I think I do. At this point in time, if somehow your native population was overproducing, maybe there are some impoverished nations which don't benefit from more people, I'm sure. But overwhelmingly, I'm thinking of, the more wealthy countries that have, as a result, lower birth rates, and they need immigrant labor. I think that's how it works, but I don't know shit.
Yeah. Well, but you are 50 years old, and that's pretty cool.
50. I am 50. Look how good I look.
How long have you look great? How long have you had that Batman thing in the background?
Shirt looks good on me, I think.
By the way, are my books in the background, by the way?
Yeah, your books.
Okay. Just making sure. Oh, we're frozen. Oh, yes, and it counts, in the words of Marv Albert. So I guess we can't talk about the NBA?
We're frozen? We're not frozen.
You were a second ago. Pete, the gambling thing in the NBA is serious. This is a serious
thing. Apparently the gambling thing in the NBA is serious, but I would argue, from what very little I know, and I shouldn't even say anything out loud because I'm sure there's plenty of people watching that know more about both sports and sports gambling than me. Money in sports is always been an argument that it destroys sports, but the paying of college players in college is one thing. But the gambling that has been legalized throughout the country, I feel like I've read opinions from smart people that say it's inevitable. It destroys everything. It's not.
No, this is complicated. I know about this. I'm actually almost
but the NBA gambling scandal is very layered and convoluted. And I don't want to. Okay. My point isn't what players and coaches and others do as much as, throwing games and so on. That's always been a part of sports. You can get involved in if you want. You can get blackmailed into and so on. I'm talking about legalized gambling.
No, I was going to go there. Let me just say 1 sentence, 2 sentences. I was going to go there.
Ronnie says the NBA is toast. What are we saying? Why are people pronouncing the NBA dead? That's harsh.
It's not. And
I think that's harsh, Ronnie. I think you should take it back, Ronnie.
We all know that in 2002, Game 6 of the NBA Finals was thrown. So the Lakers, semifinals, so that the Lakers would get to the finals. The 1919 Black Sox, they've been scandals forever. That's not my angle on this, Pete. The NBA is not toast. Although if people lose faith in the integrity of the game, then it's like professional wrestling. That's not going to happen. I have a different problem, which is, as someone who's gambled his entire life and plays poker and other things, my problem is the fucking phone. This is my problem. Because when you give 22-year-olds and 24-year-olds and 26-year-olds the ability to bet on every single play in an NBA, NFL, Major League game, you can bet on how many foul shots a person makes. You can bet on whether a person is the next thing going to be a field goal or a touchdown.
Yeah.
Is the next pitch good? When you can do that, the addictive nature of gambling is going to get out of control, and then that leads to predators who can use that to get even more money. The reality is, it was FanDuel who brought to the NBA's attention the cheating involving Terry Rozier, because FanDuel and the other big ones don't want cheating in sports because they lose money. If there's cheating in sports, they're the ones who lose money. There's better reporting today than there's ever been on players and coaches throwing games or whatever. That isn't the problem. The problem, to my surprise, because I've always been in favor of legal betting, but you take legal betting and cell phones and technology and the internet, and you put it all together, and there's going to be a major crisis. There just is. There's going to be a major financial sports betting crisis that's going to do a lot to hurt American sports.
And now this isn't.
Wait, one more sentence. Yeah. The reason that's sad to me is that sports and maybe theater are the two places where Americans can still get together and be Americans together. Where we can go to a football game or a basketball game and put aside all political differences.
Do you think people start betting on the outcome of a Broadway show?
No, but I think Republicans and Democrats can both enjoy Les Miserables. That's what I think.
Is that Segall speaking? The crisis is coming? Because I feel like a lot of other people who are even smarter, God forbid, than you on politics, on sports and gambling are saying that kind of a thing. I haven't really.
It's more about addiction than sports and gambling. I will tell you this, that I went on South Korean radio and podcast. First time in my life. It was really fun to talk about the lawsuit against Meta and TikTok and Snapchat that they knew their algorithms would make teenagers addicted to all kinds of terrible ways, self-harm, eating disorders, suicide, etc. And we even talked a little bit about gambling on that interview, because we do have to rethink how the human brain responds. I'm not an expert on this, Pete, but I've done a fair amount of research now. We have to rethink some of our premises about how the human brain responds to a little box in our hands that is extraordinarily addictive. And if you think about it, the cigarette companies knew that cigarettes were addictive. They knew it caused cancer. They hid all of that, and they eventually paid the price. Facebook knew that their algorithms were leading to addiction, and they knew that their algorithms would lead to self-harm, and they hid all that. Not the same, because we know cigarettes cause cancer in a way that maybe there's but pretty close.
Yeah, I don't want to. It's easy to get into the comparing of which addiction from addicted to social media, cigarettes, alcohol, and gambling destroys a life or lives the most. But if we just took gambling versus drinking, if drinking doesn't destroy your relationships and kill somebody or destroy your liver, and you can find a way to quit after a couple of years, you can limit the damage. But man, losing $100,000 is tough to recover from. But more importantly,
it also brings it, by the way, as we're finding out with the NBA, and I'm sorry if your audience doesn't want me talking about this, it also involves organized crime. I mean, organized crime makes so much money off of this, and then uses it for things that you and I no one likes.
Well, as Aaron in the chat says, sports gambling had more integrity when the mob was running it. No,
that's not true. That was true 15. It's not true anymore, because the money behind FanDuel and the other big companies, it is in their interest to stop cheating. It is in their interest to make sure that Terry Rozier doesn't take an injury. So I think that the problem is not at that level. The problem is the destruction of lives.
Cool thing about doing these live is the live chat, and I look forward to the audience getting bigger simply from the fact that we'll have more people weighing in. But I've got two guys, both of which I know are longtime listeners, so I know who they are. Both of them basically saying, Ronnie says I had to explain why not to gamble to my 13-year-old. And then I won't say, because maybe he wants it just for the chat, I have a 16-year-old student, so a teacher, already addicted to gambling. Right. So it would seem that a conversation has to be had with young men especially, but young women I'm sure as well, about betting and gambling. Because when I was little, my dad took us on a ferry in international waters from Maine to Nova Scotia where gambling was legal for an hour. And he used that 1 hour to teach us a lesson not to gamble. And he made $120 in 5 seconds. So it backfired. But he took that unique opportunity to try to teach us a lesson. And now you literally have to do that as a parent. You have to talk to your kids, not only about the dangers of everything else that we've always talked about, but now gambling as well, because it's so accessible.
Yes. I mean, if we had this conversation in 2008, I would have said, it's like, to me, it's like drugs. It's like prostitution. It's, it's victimless crimes, whatever. It's not true anymore. The phone is so addictive.
Yeah.
And these companies like FanDuel, who, by the way, sponsor the NBA, sponsor professional sports.
Sure.
It's not that they are crooked, and it's not that they are doing things to affect the integrity of the game. It's that their product, like cigarettes, is so addictive that we may have to rethink what we view as victimless crimes. We just may have to rethink that.
It's true of all the deadly sins once you can monetize them.
Yes, but the difference. Oh, by the way, before we end, I know we have to go. Can we talk for 1 minute about the comet?
Who?
The comet.
Comet?
The aliens coming to America, coming to the United States.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, you do.
No,
really?
I don't. I've been punched out of the news for 2 days because I was trying to literally not pay attention to news around my 50th. But looking it up.
No, we don't have to do this. All I will say is there is a non-frivolous chance that there is an interstellar object. Non-frivolous. I'm saying like 5%. There's a Harvard law professor thinks there's let me just put it this way, Pete. A Harvard law professor with a great reputation says there's a 40% chance that there's a thing going around the sun right now that may in fact be interstellar life or interstellar or something. Interstellar. Oh. Yes. You should This sounds like the typical
Harvard
conspiracy.
professor believes interstellar objects might be proof we are not alone. I want to figure that out. Avi Loeb.
Yes. And here's my interest in this, and it's my only interest. I mean, aliens are cool. But leaving that aside, if for any reason we should be able to make contact with interstellar, I don't know what you call it, anything, it does go a long way to our debates about God. And I would like, and that wouldn't be a bad thing.
NASA has discounted the Harvard astronomers' hypothesis.
I don't trust NASA for
that
a
rare interstellar object hurtling through our solar system is a relic from civilization in another celestial neighborhood and could potentially be dire for humanity.
That's not my interest in this. I don't think we're all going to die next week, but I do think there's a non-frivolous chance that this is an interstellar object that was made by some kind of life form, not just a comet that broke off of something. And all that does for me is it tells me people of faith are going to have a hard reckoning.
I just want to say, I know we're live. I don't appreciate you hijacking to something I had no idea what the fuck you're talking about. I feel like I look like a real idiot for not knowing about your dumb comet.
Yeah. You're not an idiot. You're just old and 50. That's all.
I'm old and 50.
I knew you when you were a kid. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
You were like 37 when I first met you.
You've never known me when I had hair, though.
You were just like almost a toddler. I mean, in a way, and now you've grown into this amazing 50-year-old person.
I don't know about that. I'm very flawed.
We all are, Pete. Except for Batman. Yes.
When things fall apart.
By the way, your audience. I just read a great book called Trust. Really good.
Trust.
A little bit hard going, a little bit, but it's worth it. 2 great surprises in this book.
I will. I'm glad I recommended mine, and I look forward to yours. And to those of you who joined us live, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to add that we'll be back. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Love it. Love that you can reference the original show that your dad would not let you.
I ran away from home because of that show.
Really funny. Because your dad wouldn't let you watch TV.
My parents let me watch the first episode, not knowing that it was continued to the next episode. They wouldn't let me watch the next episode.
You got addicted to TV and Batman.
Yes.
See?
Yes. So I ran away. I still say it's one of the best satires ever on television. Easily.
If you say so. All right. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Let's all hope the Supreme Court does the right thing tomorrow.
Watch the arguments tomorrow. Tell everybody about our discussion.
You can't watch the arguments. You can only hear the arguments.
Listen,
I wish we could watch.
Pay attention to the arguments tomorrow. You're right. Good point. Thank you. And thank you for everybody watching live. Appreciate it. Can't do it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Thanks, Segall. And go support him in all the ways. And I'm going to end it now. There you go. I ended it now. That is available to watch on YouTube or Substack. Eric Segall, as always, a great conversation yesterday. I also caught up with JL Covan. I'm going to share that conversation coming up next. So if you want to just stay right here, it should just start playing. I think that's how podcasts work. Maybe not. Depends on where you're listening. But JL Covan, you can find that one next. Should be up soon if it's not up yet. And there you go. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate you and hope to hear from you in all of the ways. Pop me an email, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and listen to John Carroll. See John Carroll tomorrow night in Virginia. It's going to be off the hook. JohnCarroll.org for tickets. I will see you there. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. Let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and